"They are yaks!" he shouted. "Take cover!" We were surrounded by bare mud, with occasional clumps of stunted brush. There was a sound of machine gun fire from the sky. The column drove more quickly, toward a shallow fold in the ground which might give some protection. I was leaning out of the window, trying to see through the flying mud spun by our wheels. 2 Fokker wolves had appeared, and had shot down 2 of the yaks, which crashed far to the west. Until the final stages of the war, Russian aircraft were no match for the Luftwaffe. Even in Prussia, where Russian air power was its most active, the appearance of one Messerschmitt 109 or one Fokker Wolf would make a dozen armoured Ilyushin bombers turn and run. At this period, when German air power still possessed important reserves, the lot of the Russian pilots was not enviable. 2 of the 3 remaining yaks had taken flight, pursued by our planes, when the last dived straight at the convoy. One of the Fokker Wolves was chasing him, and was plainly trying to get him in his sights. We reached the dip in the road. The Soviet plane had come down very low to use its machine guns. The trucks ahead of us had stopped short, and the able-bodied were jumping down into the mud. I was already holding the door open, and I jumped with my feet together, plunging downward, when I heard the machine guns. With my nose in the mud, my hands on my head, and my eyes instinctively shut, I heard the machine gun and the 2 planes through a hellish intensity of noise. The sound of racing engines was followed by a loud explosion. I looked up to watch the plane with the black crosses on its wings regain altitude. 300 or 400 yards away, where the yak had crashed, there was a plume of black smoke. Everybody was getting up again. "One more who won't give any trouble," shouted a fat corporal, who was clearly delighted to be still alive. Several voices joined in a cheer for the Luftwaffe. "Anybody hit?" one of the non-coms called out. "Let's get going, then." I walked over to the Tatra, trying to brush off the worst of the mud that clung to my uniform. I noticed 2 holes in the door I had opened to get out, which appeared to have swung shut on its own momentum. 2 round holes, each outlined by a ring of metal from which the paint had been scraped away. Nervously, I pulled open the door. Inside, I saw a man I shall never forget. A man sitting normally on the seat, whose lower face had been reduced to a bloody pulp. "Ernst?" I asked in a choking voice. "Ernst?" I threw myself at him. "Ernst, what? Say something. Ernst!" I looked frantically for some features on that horrible face. "Ernst!" I was nearly crying. Outside, the column was getting ready to leave. The 2 trucks behind me were impatiently blowing their horns.